Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. I am Mr. Dean Kovalt, and today we are going to talk about conversion factors and what they are. And so, conversion factors are going to be, if we break down the name, what do we think about when we think about factors in math? When I say, like, what are the factors of 6? If you remember from math, the factors are the numbers that you multiply to get a certain number. So, for example, if I ask you what the factors of 6 are, then what are the numbers that I have to multiply to get 6? So, in order to get 6, I would have to multiply 2 times 3. So, that would give me 6. And I would have to multiply 1 times 6 would also give me 6. So these would be considered the factors of 6. So when we're talking about conversion factors, we mean pretty much the same thing. A factor that you multiply to get a certain result. So when we're adding this specifier to the word factor, we're talking about a type of factor called a conversion factor. So in this case, it's something we multiply in order to convert. But what are we converting from and what are we converting to? In this case, the conversion factors are used to convert from one unit to the other. So that's what a conversion factor is. We multiply by something to convert from one unit to the other. So we're trying to get to a certain unit, so we use a conversion factor to get to that unit. So that's what a conversion factor is. And so what I have on the board here is a couple of conversion factors. And the first thing I want to say is in order to get a conversion factor, you always have to start with some sort of equality. Without the equality, you can't have a conversion factor. And so I have a couple of equalities here, well, A and B, and then I'll explain how you get the conversion factor from the equality. But you can't have a conversion factor without the equality, so you have to start with an equality. So here's one equality that we are very familiar with. So we know that 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. And so you start with that equality, and then to get the conversion factor, it's really easy. All you do is you take one part of the equality and you put it over the other part, and you create a fraction or a ratio. So that's what I did over here. So here I have 2a. So here I took my equality, I took one part of the equality and I put it over the other. So here we have 1 foot is over 12 inches. But then you can also flip it. So you can get a different conversion factor by flipping it. So you could put 12 inches over 1 foot. So you can always get two conversion factors from one equality. So you either put one side over the other or you flip it. Both of those are going to be two different conversion factors. Okay. The same thing with B. Here we have a less known equality. So unless you are, you've been through science classes before and you know your metric prefixes and all that and your prefix multipliers, then this is probably not going to be familiar to us. So here I have one microgram. Again, that little U with the tail is for micro, or you could think of it as a fancy M. So 1 microgram is equal to 10 to the negative 6 grams. So that equality we can also convert into a conversion factor. So again, I'm just going to take one side and put it over the other. So here I took 1 microgram over 10 to the negative 6 grams. That's one possible conversion factor. Or I can flip it and I put 10 to the negative 6 grams over 1 microgram. Okay, so I can get, again, 2 different conversion factors. Now, the great thing about conversion factors is since I have an equality here, if these two things are equal to each other, and I create a fraction or a ratio of them, so if I have this over that, then this is equal to something in particular. So what is 1 foot over 12 inches? Or what is 12 inches over 1 foot? If you're not careful, you might say, well, 12 inches over 1 foot, well, that's 12. And you would be wrong, right? And that's a common mistake. That's if these two are equal, if 1 foot is equal to 12 inches, what happens when you divide by equal over equal? So if I have 2 over 2, well, that's obviously 2 and 2 are the same thing. You divide by the same thing, you get 1, right? So that's, if I have equal over equal, it should work the same way here. And that's what you got to keep in mind. So 1 foot, the magnitude or the length of 1 foot is the same as the magnitude or length of 12 inches, right? So even though the numbers are different, the units are different too, and that's really important to keep in mind. So the unit inch is smaller than a foot, and we need 12 of them to equal the length of 1 foot. So the magnitudes are equal, so this ratio is equal to 1s because they're equal to each other. So if I divide by equals, then I get 1. Same thing for this one. 1. And I could do the same thing for this equality here. So since this is equal to this, if I put them in a ratio, then both of these ratios are equal to 1. So conversion factors are equal to 1. So what happens when you multiply by 1? Let's go back to math. So if I take a number, any number, let's go back to 6, I multiply that by 1, we get what? We get our number back, 6, right? So I take 2,000, multiply by that 1, and I get my number back, 2,000, okay? So what happens when we multiply by a conversion factor? Again, a conversion factor is equal to 1. So if I have, let's take an easy one. Let's say I have 2 feet, right? If I take my 2 feet and I multiply by my conversion factor, and let's say, again, a conversion factor is something you multiply by in order to convert from one unit to another unit. So if I want to convert from feet, then I'm going to use this conversion factor with feet on the bottom. So I have feet, 12 inches. My feet cancel out. If I multiply by this, then I get 24, and I have inches. That's going to be inches. Now notice that I now have 24 inches. I started with 2 feet. I multiplied by a conversion factor. This conversion factor is equal to 1. If I multiply a magnitude by a conversion factor, I am not changing the magnitude. The magnitude stays the same. So the 24 inches that I end with, it should be equal to the 2 feet that I started with as far as the length goes or the magnitude of whatever I'm looking at. So this is the great thing about conversion factors. Conversion factors, like the number 1, because they are equal to number 1, do not change the magnitude when you multiply them. You only convert the unit from one unit to another. That's why we call them conversion factors. They only convert units. So here I go from 2 feet to 24 inches. The only thing I'm doing here is I'm converting from feet to inches, I'm going to a smaller unit. So in effect, if this is my, let's say this is 2 feet, it's roughly 2 feet, maybe a bit longer. So I started with, let's say this is my 2 feet. I started with this magnitude, and I started with it in feet, the unit feet. So I have 2 of them. I do my conversion, I end up with the same magnitude, but now it's divided into inches. So then that would be the same thing as if I do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that would be 12. I know it's not 12 inches, it doesn't look right, but bear with me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so here I have now 12 spaces. Here I have now 12 spaces. They're supposed to be equal spaces. I didn't, they're not equal, but for the purposes of the argument, now I have 12 here, 12 here. So now I've divided up my magnitude, same magnitude. I didn't change the length. All I did is change the unit in which this is measured in. So I went from 2 now to 24. And that's really all a conversion factor is you are converting from one unit to the other. Okay? I hope this was helpful in clarifying what conversion factors are. If you like this video, like the video, share the video, ring the bell, subscribe to the channel so you get more videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining me.